The dawn broke cold and cruel across the prairie. A veil of pale mist rolled over the dry earth, clinging to the brittle weeds and cracked soil. A woman knelt beside a half-buried wagon, her shawl tattered and her hands trembling as she pressed a damp cloth to her youngest boy's burning forehead. The grave behind her was fresh, the name carved into the crude wooden cross read Ethan Dalton, 1847 to 1873. Her breath shuddered as she whispered a prayer the wind carried away. In the distance, a lone crow cawed, its echo fading into silence. Mary Dalton was only 35, but her face carried the weight of 50 winters. Dust and grief had settled in the lines around her eyes, and the once golden locket at her neck had turned dull with wear. Her eldest, Tommy, 12 and thin as a fence post, stood guard with a rusted rifle far too heavy for his hands. Will and little Sam huddled near their mother, coughing from the dust that drifted through the dry grass. The land stretched endlessly, gold and gray under the rising sun. It was beautiful, but it had teeth. It devoured the weak and tested the strong. A voice in her head repeated her late husband's words. "The West don't owe you nothing, Mary. You gotta take what it won't give." Once there had been laughter. The Dalton Ranch near Dry Creek had been their dream. 50 acres, 3 horses, and a river that glittered like glass in the evening light. Ethan had built a home there with his bare hands, and Mary had painted its walls herself. But dreams out here had a way of turning to dust. When Ethan was gunned down in a senseless dispute over water rights, the town that once toasted his courage turned its back overnight. She remembered that day too well. The preacher, hat in hand, had spoken softly, his eyes full of pity. "This town ain't built for orphans and widows, Mary. Best move on before winter." The banker had been colder still. "Without a man's name on the deed, there's nothing to hold here." She'd left at sunrise, her boys packed in the wagon, the last of their flour tied in a sack. For weeks they rolled south, through dust and hunger, past rivers that dried before their eyes. Their wagon broke near Devil's Canyon, the axle snapping clean in two. She patched it with rope and faith. Both were fraying fast. In Silver Bend, a small town smelling of whiskey and horse sweat, Mary tried to find work. Her boots were torn, her dress faded, her pride barely standing. She knocked on doors, begged for laundry to wash, bread to bake, wood to chop. But every door closed. "Too many mouths to feed," they said. "Ain't got nothing for you, ma'am." Her son stood behind her, eyes hollow, clothes clinging to their thin frames. The saloon was her last hope. She stepped inside, the wooden doors creaking wide. The piano stopped mid-tune. Laughter died. All eyes turned toward her. Look what the wind blew in. A man snickered from the corner, his hat tipped low. "Widow woman with pups." "I'm looking for work," she said quietly. "I can clean, cook, mend. Anything honest." The man grinned, eyes crawling over her like a snake's tongue. "Honest, huh? I got a job for a lady like you. Pays good, too." The laughter that followed was rough and cruel. Mary's cheeks burned. She lifted her chin, turned to leave, but the man caught her wrist. "Don't walk away, darling." She slapped him hard across the face. His drink spilled, and the saloon went dead quiet. "You think you're too good for us?" he hissed. He shoved her backward into the mud outside. Her sons rushed to her side, trembling, afraid. She stood, covered in dirt, but unbroken. Her voice was low and steady when she said, "We keep moving. We don't beg again." That night, she built a fire on the edge of the prairie. The boys slept close, the youngest whimpering softly. She stared into the flames, her jaw set against the night wind. Thunder rolled somewhere far off. A storm was coming. She could feel it in her bones. Out in the darkness, beyond the flicker of the firelight, a shadow sat on horseback watching them. The rider was tall, silent, wrapped in a duster coated with dust. His hat hid his face, but the glint of steel at his hip told enough. His horse shifted, hoofs crunching gravel softly. He didn't approach, just watched. The woman, the 3 boys, the stubborn fire burning against the endless dark. The man's eyes softened slightly as he muttered to himself, "Ain't right. World's too cruel to some folks." Then he turned his horse toward the west, vanishing into the mist as the wind picked up. Behind him, the widow sat by her dying fire, unaware that her fate had just crossed paths with a stranger who carried his own ghosts, and maybe her salvation. By dawn, the first grains of sand began to dance in the air, carried by a restless wind that whispered of a storm to come. The sky darkened to a bruised gray, and somewhere beyond the hills, thunder growled again. Mary tightened her shawl, pulled her boys close, and whispered the same promise she made every morning. We keep moving till we find home. The storm came like the wrath of God himself. By midday, the wind was already howling, hot, gritty air sweeping across the plains in furious gusts. The sky turned a sickly yellow, swallowing the sun. Mary gripped the reins of the wagon, her knuckles white, while her boys huddled beneath a blanket. Sand bit at her face, filling her mouth and eyes until tears streamed down her cheeks. "Hold on," she shouted over the roar. The horses screamed, panicking. The wagon tilted as one wheel struck a rut. Tommy tried to steady the smaller boys, but the wind tore the canvas clean off the frame. Dust whirled through the air like knives. For a moment, Mary thought they'd all be buried alive. Through the swirling chaos, a dark shape moved, at first just a blur, then the outline of a man on horseback, leaning low against the storm. His long coat flapped like wings. He pulled up beside the wagon, shouting something she couldn't hear. Then a thick blanket dropped over her shoulders, heavy and rough, blocking some of the biting sand. "Follow me," the voice thundered through the wind. "There's cover ahead." Mary hesitated. Strangers on the frontier could be salvation or death, but the storm gave her no choice. The horses were half-blind, staggering. She nodded once, and the man looped his reins around the wagon's hitch, forcing his horse forward against the gale. Together, they crawled across the wasteland until the outline of a cliff appeared, a jagged ridge with an opening at its base. When they finally reached the mouth of a shallow cave, Mary could barely breathe. She stumbled down, dragging the boys inside while the stranger unharnessed the horses. Sand scraped against the rocks like 1,000 whispers. The storm screamed just beyond the entrance, but here, there was mercy, a pocket of silence and safety. Mary's chest heaved as she tried to calm her sons. The stranger knelt beside them, pulling a canteen from his saddlebag. His hands were scarred, steady, familiar with hardship. "Drink," he said simply, voice low and firm. Mary's instinct was to refuse. "We don't take charity." He met her eyes. "Ain't charity, just survival." The tone stopped her. There was no arrogance in it, no pity, only truth. She took the canteen, wet her lips, and passed it to her boys. In the flicker of the small fire he built, she studied him carefully. His face was rough cut, dust streaking a day's worth of stubble. A thin scar ran across his left cheek, and his eyes, cold blue but kind, watched the fire more than her. His clothes told the story of a drifter. Boots worn thin, hat sweat-stained, revolver resting loose on his belt. "What's your name?" she finally asked. He poked at the flames with a stick. Jack Cooper." "Mary Dalton," she replied after a pause. "These are my boys, Tommy, Will, and Sam." He nodded once, saying nothing more. Outside, the storm raged like the world was ending. Inside, the fire crackled, throwing soft orange light across 4 frightened faces and 1 quiet stranger. When the worst of the storm passed, Jack stepped outside to check the wagon. Mary followed, wrapping her shawl tight. The world was buried under a new skin of dust. The wheels were half covered, but the frame still stood. "You're lucky," Jack said, brushing sand from his hat. "Could have been worse. That storm's killed whole herds." Mary frowned. "We've been through worse." He looked at her, half a smile tugging at his lips. "Reckon you have." They worked together in silence, clearing sand and tightening ropes. Her hands blistered, but she didn't complain. She hadn't in months. When the wheel jammed, Jack knelt to fix it. That's when she noticed the small medallion hanging from his neck. U.S. cavalry insignia, dulled by dust. "You a soldier?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, gaze fixed on the ground. "Was. Long time ago." "What happened?" He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched until it was clear the question cut deep. Finally, he said, "Did some things I ain't proud of. Saw more men die than any man should. So I left. Been riding ever since." Mary didn't press. She knew that look, the one carried by folks who had ghosts too heavy to name. By evening, the sky cleared enough to reveal a blood-red sunset stretching across the horizon. The wind had died down, leaving behind a quiet that felt sacred. Jack built another fire outside the cave. Mary cooked the last of their beans in a dented tin pot while her boys gathered twigs. When the first stars blinked above them, a low growl echoed through the dark. Tommy froze. "Ma, what was that?" Jack stood, drawing his revolver. "Coyotes. Maybe worse." The boys pressed closer to their mother. Eyes glinted at the edge of the firelight. Jack stepped forward, calm but alert. The growls grew louder, circling. Then, crack, he fired once into the air. The sound tore through the night like thunder. The eyes vanished. Silence returned. Mary exhaled slowly. Jack holstered his gun, glanced at her, and said quietly, "Ain't no man nor beast talking you while I'm here." She didn't know how to respond. The flames danced between them, casting long shadows across the stone. For the first time in weeks, the boys slept without crying. Mary watched the stranger across the fire, wondering who he really was, a savior or another storm in disguise. He sat still, face unreadable, the firelight flickering across the scar on his cheek. And though neither of them spoke again that night, something shifted, small but undeniable. Out there in the endless wild, two broken souls had found a fragile kind of peace, forged not in words, but in the quiet understanding of those who had both lost too much. As the embers dimmed, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying a promise neither of them could hear just yet. But it was there, faint, steady, waiting. By the time the morning sun rose over the ridges, the world seemed new, clean after the storm's rage. Dust still hung low, a ghostly haze across the land, but the sky was open and blue again. Jack saddled his horse in silence while Mary stirred the ashes of the dying fire. The boys laughed softly nearby, chasing each other through the sand, their bare feet kicking up tiny clouds. It was the first time she'd heard them laugh in weeks. The sound filled her chest with something she hadn't felt since Ethan died. Hope, fragile as glass. Jack checked the wagon one last time, tightening the reins. "There's a place not far from here," he said, adjusting his hat. "Old trading post. Might be supplies left behind." Mary nodded, brushing the dust from her skirt. "Lead the way." They rode through the morning, the sun climbing higher, heat shimmer rising off the rocks. The trail wound through narrow canyons and dry creek beds, the kind of land that didn't forgive mistakes. Jack led from the front, his movements careful, eyes scanning the horizon. Every so often, he'd glance back to make sure the wagon kept up. By noon, they reached the edge of Hollow Ridge, a ghost settlement half buried in sand. Broken walls, collapsed roofs, and an old sign creaked in the wind, McLaren's trade post. A few barrels lay scattered, bones of wagons long picked clean by time. "This'll do," Jack said, dismounting. "Stay close." They explored the ruins together. Mary found a cracked water barrel with a few sips left. Jack scavenged a rusted shovel, a rope, and a tin of beans. It wasn't much, but in the frontier, it was a treasure. While they worked, the boys chased a stray chicken that must have wandered from somewhere. Their laughter echoed against the canyon walls. Mary smiled faintly. Jack caught her looking and offered a rare half-grin. "They're tough, your boys." "They have to be," she said. "Ain't no softness left in this world." He nodded. "You're wrong about that. You just gotta look harder." The words hung there, quiet but heavy. They made camp inside the remnants of the trading post. The walls blocked most of the wind, and Jack fixed the old fireplace. As dusk settled, the place felt almost like home, if only for a heartbeat. Mary boiled the beans, sharing them evenly among the four of them. But peace out here was always borrowed time. The first sign came with the sound of hooves. Distant, slow at first, then closer, 5, maybe 6 riders. Jack's expression hardened. He rose, hand instinctively falling to his revolver. "Get the boys inside," he said. Mary didn't ask questions. She ushered them into the corner behind a broken wall. The riders appeared minutes later, dusty men with guns slung low and greed in their eyes. Their leader was broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray and his smile slick with danger. "Well, I'll be damned," he drawled. "Jack Cooper. Thought you were buzzard meat by now." Mary watched from the shadows. Jack's jaw clenched. "Vince Keller." Vince dismounted, laughing. "Ain't this something? The prodigal bastard returns. You run off with the Army's gold once, and they never let you live it down, huh?" Jack's voice was calm but tight. "We're just passing through, Vince. Don't want trouble." Vince smirked, eyes sliding toward the wagon. "Don't look like you're alone, neither. You keeping a family now, or are they just strays you picked up?" "Don't," Jack warned quietly. Vince chuckled, walking closer. "Relax, old friend. I just want what's fair, half your supplies, and maybe a little company from the lady. Long trail ahead, after all." Jack drew his gun before the last word left Vince's mouth. "Not today." For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then one of Vince's men twitched toward his rifle, and all hell broke loose. The first shot shattered a lantern, plunging the post into a stuttering half-light. Flames licked the walls. Bullets ricocheted off stone and metal. Mary covered her sons, praying they wouldn't make a sound. Jack moved like lightning, firing, ducking, reloading with practiced rhythm. A bandit lunged from behind, tackling him into the dirt. Jack fought back with raw fury, slamming his fist into the man's jaw, wrenching the knife from his hand. He plunged it into his attacker's chest, then spun as another burst through the doorway. The next seconds blurred into smoke and thunder. Mary peeked through the cracks in the wall. Vince was shouting orders, his revolver blazing. The fire spread across the rafters. Tommy whimpered, and one of the bandits turned toward the sound. Mary's heart froze. The man reached for the boy, only to be struck down as Jack tackled him, blade flashing again. The gun went off, the sound deafening. Jack's body jerked. He'd been hit in the shoulder. "Jack!" Mary screamed. He gritted his teeth, grabbed her arm, and pulled her toward the wagon. "Get the boys now." She didn't argue. They ran into the night, smoke curling behind them. Jack swung onto his horse, blood soaking his sleeve, and helped Mary climb up with Sam in her arms. Tommy and Will scrambled into the back of the wagon. Vince's voice roared from the flames. "You can't run forever, Cooper." Jack didn't look back. He kicked his horse hard, dragging the wagon onto the moonlit trail. The wind tore at their faces as the burning post vanished behind them. For miles, there was nothing but the pounding of hooves and the rasp of Jack's breath. His shirt was slick with blood. Mary held him steady, her face pale, eyes full of fear she didn't dare speak. "You could have left us," she whispered finally. He smiled weakly through the pain. "Couldn't." The wagon rattled into the canyon, swallowed by shadows. The stars above them burned cold and bright, the kind that belonged only to wanderers and lost souls. And somewhere in that endless dark, with death at their heels and smoke fading behind them, Mary realized she trusted this broken, haunted cowboy more than she'd trusted anyone since Ethan died. The first light of dawn crept across the canyon like a whisper of mercy. Pale gold poured over the rocks, softening their edges and painting the world in fragile hope. Mary stirred awake to birdsong, the first she'd heard in weeks. Jack lay nearby, his shirt soaked dark with blood. His breathing was shallow, uneven. She tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it to his wound. "Stay with me," she murmured. "Please." He blinked slowly, eyes unfocused. "Ain't going nowhere," he muttered, before slipping back into the haze of fever. They'd ridden through the night until the trail vanished into the hills. Now, they were hidden in a small valley cradled by trees and a winding stream. Green, alive, untouched by the cruelty of the desert. It felt like a place the world had forgotten. For 3 days, Mary tended to him. The boys fetched water, gathered berries, and built a small shelter beside an old cabin that leaned against the hill. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling names she didn't know, ghosts of men long dead. Sometimes he'd jolt awake, reaching for his gun, then stare blankly into the quiet dawn, as if trying to remember where he was. Mary watched over him without rest. She patched the wound, boiled roots, whispered prayers. When he finally woke clear-eyed, the first thing he said was, "You should have left me behind." She smiled tiredly. "And let you die alone out here? That's not how we do things." He looked at her for a long time, saying nothing. Then, softly, "You remind me of someone I once knew." She had fire too. She chuckled faintly. "I ran out of fire a long time ago." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. You're still burning." Over the next week, they mended the cabin together. Jack's strength returned slowly. He showed Tommy how to cut fence posts, while how to saddle a horse, and little Sam how to whittle sticks into toy soldiers. Mary planted seeds she'd saved from her old garden: corn, beans, and hope. In the evenings, they sat by the fire outside, the sound of crickets wrapping the world in peace. It was the first time the land felt kind. One night, as the firelight danced across their faces, Jack finally spoke of his past. His voice was low, thick with the weight of memory. "I rode with bad men once. Called ourselves soldiers, but we were killers. We burned villages, took what we wanted. One night, I saw a child running from the flames, and I froze. Couldn't pull the trigger. My captain did it for me." He stared into the fire. "That was the last night I wore a uniform. Been running from that boy's ghost ever since." Mary's eyes shimmered in the firelight. "You can't outrun ghosts, Jack. You make peace with them, or they never leave." He looked at her, eyes softening. "You made peace with yours?" She hesitated. "Not yet, but I'm trying." The fire cracked between them, warm and alive. No more words were needed. The silence said enough. Days turned into weeks. The valley became their world. The boys laughed more often, Mary smiled easier, and Jack, though he never said it aloud, had begun to believe he might have found something worth staying for. Then one morning, while fetching water, Tommy spotted hoof prints by the stream. Fresh ones. Jack's face went pale when he saw them. "They found us." That night, the peace shattered. Under the rising moon, 5 riders descended into the valley, Vince Keller and what was left of his gang. The air filled with the smell of smoke and gun oil. Mary ushered her sons inside the cabin. Jack loaded his rifle jaw tight. "Stay with the boys," he told her. She shook her head. "Not this time." Vince's voice echoed across the yard. "Jack, you can't hide from me forever. Come out, and maybe I'll let the lady live." Jack stepped from the shadows, rifle raised. "You always talk too damn much, Vince." The first shot rang out, tearing through the night. Chaos followed. The gang spread wide, firing wildly. Sparks flew as bullets struck stone. Jack moved fast, rolling behind the trough, returning fire with calm precision. 2 men went down before they reached the porch. Inside, Mary clutched a rifle Jack had repaired days earlier. Her hands trembled, but when a bandit kicked in the door, she didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger. The man dropped, dead before he hit the floor. Smoke filled the cabin. The boys cried out. "Mom, I'm here," she shouted, reloading, eyes fierce with a courage she hadn't known she still had. Outside, Vince and Jack circled each other among the burning fence posts. Fire painted their faces in flickering gold and shadow. "You think you're some kind of savior now?" Vince sneered, cocking his gun. Jack's voice was steady. "No, just a man who found something worth protecting." Both fired. The echo rolled across the valley, then faded into silence. When the smoke cleared, Vince lay sprawled in the dirt, his revolver inches from his outstretched hand. Jack stood over him, blood blooming from a fresh wound in his side. He swayed, barely standing. Mary ran to him, catching him before he fell. "Jack, no, stay with me." He looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Guess I finally stopped running." She shook her head, tears streaming. "Don't you dare leave now." His hand brushed her cheek. "Already home," he whispered. Then his body went still. The wind fell quiet. The flames died to embers. Somewhere in the hills, dawn broke again, soft, forgiving. Months later, the cabin stood tall, repaired, and alive. Green shoots filled the field. The boys worked the land, their laughter carried by the wind. Mary watched them from the porch, the same porch Jack had built. A small wooden cross stood on the hill beyond the stream. marked simply with his name, Jack Cooper. She placed a hand on the railing, the breeze lifting her hair, and whispered, "You were right, Jack. This was home all along." The camera would fade slowly, the prairie bathed in morning light. The sound of a gentle breeze, children's laughter, and the faint rustle of leaves. Then the narrator's voice, steady, solemn, but warm. The West took everything from her, her husband, her home, her peace. But it gave her something back, too. A man's courage, a stranger's heart. And in that, she built a home the world couldn't take again. Soft music swells. The screen darkens to the words. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more tales from the frontier. The final shot, the valley under golden light, smoke rising gently from the chimney. Proof that even in the hardest lands, life finds a way to grow again.